Okay, so we're ready for 2-3, which is this is the fourth video, and we're going to talk about designing relational databases. So at this point, all we've done is really created this table and inputted some data, and I finished it up, and you can see I put all the information in there, set up some different rules, pricing rules. This had to be 5 characters. We made this blue. We created a drop down for this one. We changed the input mask for this one and so forth. So that's all about setting up tables. Now we're going to talk about what makes a relational database a relational database. This is really a good chapter to read because it talks and explains why we do things the way we do them. But the term relational database, you need to understand, is a collection of related tables. Right now we only have one called the equipment table, but each table stores about one part of the system. So consider, for example, and the textbook goes through this. This is Mary's rental, and right now we just have the equipment table, but she might need some separate tables that stores details about the employees, the customer orders, information about each piece of equipment when it's been rented in each order, and also the service history about each one. So a lot of different tables, but the different tables are related or connected to each other through a common field somewhere. And that's one of the things you have to do when you're planning. And what we'll do is we'll set this up in the relationship window where we can connect this table to another table through one common field. Now, if I had 8 tables here, they don't have to be related to all 8 tables, but they have to be related to at least one other one. So it's like creating a spider web of where they're connected somehow within the database. Okay, so in this section really talks about some of these different ones. So one of the things that we're going to talk about, and we do this primarily in this chapter, is using that primary key in another field, and we're going to go through how that sets things up. So right now we need to create another table. So I am going to create a table in Design View, and it's called Table 1. We'll change that here in just a minute. We're going to set this up. We're going to have a service ID. Okay. And for service ID, we're going to make this one short text. And I'm going to leave this off with no description, but that'll be a unique ID number. We're also going to make this the primary key, which means that every ID number, like a receipt number, has to be different. You can't duplicate that particular one. Now we're going to move down. We're going to do the service date, and using camel case. And this is going to be date and time. And I'll leave off the description for time's sake. Description. Again, you got to make sure the spelling is right. We're going to make that short text. Check that. I need to go back up here and add a field. So I'm going to insert a row here. After service date, I need to do service type. And that is also going to be short text. After description, I'm going to do performed by. That would be the person that their ID number of who actually did the service. We want to keep track of that. Then we're going to put in one called FK Equipment ID. FK stands for foreign key, and it's going to be short key also. It has to match, and I'll put this down so you can see it. This must match an equipment ID number value in the equipment table. This is how we're going to connect the dots between these two. Okay, and then this is the foreign key on this one. You'll see how that works here in a minute, where equipment ID on the other one is a primary key, and that's why this one becomes a foreign key. Then we're going to have odometer reading, and odometer reading is a number. And then we're going to have hours, which is a number, and then we're going to have total cost, which is currency. Okay, and I'm going to save this one as service history. And I have that particular one saved. Okay, now some of the types I'm going to change on this one for service date. Okay, for service date right here, I am going to make the format general date. Notice how I create the fields and then I go back and I do some of the details. I'm going to make this required. All right, then I'm going to go down here to service type. I'm going to make the field size of this one 15. I'm also going to make this one required. Go ahead and go down to description. I'm going to leave that at 255 characters, but I'm going to make it required. Okay. Performed by, I'm going to make this only 3 characters in length. And I'm going to make it required. So you don't get out of the not filling in the blanks. You've got to. And FK equipment ID, remember that one was only 5 characters on the other one, so it needs to be 5 on this one. And we're going to make it required as well. And then total cost is currency, but we are going to make it required because each one has a cost attached to it. And I am going to make sure that I save this one. Okay. Another thing that I could do is I could go to the service type, for instance, and I could make this one, remember, using the lookup wizard. I'm going to type the values to give my list. And first cell is going to be, it could be a maintenance. And down below that, I'm going to put repair. And then below that, inspection. Next, limit to the list, do not allow multiples. And I've got that one created as well. I'm going to save and close that particular table. Now, here's the key. I've got to be able to connect these 2 tables together. So when you do these relationships, notice none of my tables are open. But to give you an indication of how I'm doing this, there's that equipment ID from the one particular table, from the equipment table. And we said that when we fill out the service history for one of these, that when we get to the FK equipment ID, it's got to be one of these pieces of equipment from over here, which is identified by the ID number. So what we're going to do is make sure that we've tied these together, and it has to be one of those numbers through a relationship. Plus, we're going to be able to pull information from both these tables at the same time. So again, your tables must be closed. Again, your tables have to be closed. And here's how you do it. You go to Database Tools and Relationships. Right now, we have no relationships. That window is closed. So I add both my tables. I resize these so I can read everything. And I look for how I can connect the dots between these 2 particular tables. Again, we already know it's the equipment ID. And then there's the FK, which is foreign key. You always want to go from the primary key to the foreign key. And here's how I do it. I'm going to point at equipment ID. I'm going to click and drag, hover over FK equipment ID and release. Gives me a little dialog box. I want to enforce referential integrity, and I'm going to check all 3 of these. I'll explain referential integrity in just a second, and I create my relationship. This is called a one-to-many relationship, which means that's what the referential integrity did. That means that because this is a primary key, there can only be one unique number for the equipment ID, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't put another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in my equipment list. However, that piece of equipment that's labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 can be serviced in numerous times, infinity. So it can show up, that number can show up several times in this particular table. Okay, so that's a one-to-many, and that's what that infinity sign means. That's a one-to-many relationship, and your textbook talks about these as you go through those. The cascading means that if I were to delete one of these over here, it would cascade and delete on this one or update any of the particular information. Okay, so let me show you how this works then. So if I brought in data from Excel for that service history one, let's go browse for it, and it says service history one, and I append it to my service history. Bring some data in to look at the information. There's those equipment IDs that have to be on our equipment table. Problems on this one, which means I could have something misspelled. So let me go back and look at this. Service ID, service date, service type, description, performed by, FK equipment ID, odometer reading, hours, and total cost. So I'm going to resave this. Close my tables. Let's try this again, see if I get it to work this time. I might be having some problems with my flash drive as well. Okay. So I'm having some problems with this particular one. But what it would do is it bring it in, and I will get this to work, and I'll do a little addendum to this so you can see how these two are tied together. So the important thing could be, because I had a little glitch, when you look at your relationships, and these are saved again, this shows how the two tables are related to one another, and it's a one-to-many. So it's always going to be primarily the primary key going to the identical field in another table that is not the primary key. Remember, the service ID is on this one. If I were to add a third table, it would have to tie to either service history or equipment, one or the other. You don't tie it to everything in there. It's just got to be attached somehow. And that's something that goes into the planning of databases. Okay, so I'll show this to you if I can get it to work properly so you can see the outcome of that. But that's how you set up these relationships. That's why spelling and data input is so important. Okay, good luck. That's it on chapter 2. And again, inputting that information is what is key.